Here's our next 3 cards. This one we're going to start out by die cutting on our white cardstock and then using our Just Jade. Remember to pay attention to where the cutting blade is. Then I'm going to adhere Poppy Parade color cardstock and then just trim it off so it shows through the little eyelets. We're going to be using Bumblebee ink for our sentiment and just stamp it towards the bottom of the card. Then adhere the Just Jade cardstock behind as a layer. That's how it's gonna flow. Then we're gonna use ribbon and we're gonna color it with the Poppy Parade blends. I'm going to use the brush side. Be really gentle with the brush side because you can damage the brush by pushing too hard on it. So be gentle while you're coloring. Color it all the way through and you're going to have to let it dry. Meanwhile, we'll put on our dimensionals, leaving space for the ribbon in the back. You don't want the dimensionals to be interfering with the ribbon. We're going to tie a bow in the front. The designer series paper we use is Flowers for Every Season. And trim off the bow and adhere it to the front. Using our Take Your Pick tool, take the backings off the dimensionals and then positioning it for our first card. See, I used the different designer series paper for the other card, but the colors coordinate well. Okay, for this card, I'm going to stack these and then cut them at a diagonal and then mix and match. I'm going to use the Subtles texture folder on the cinnamon cider. Then I want to show you this fun technique of using the background stamps. I usually leave them in their case. I have a piece of scrap paper to help me. I'm using Mossy Meadow. Ink up the stamp real well, leaving it in the case because those big blocks are so hard to handle. They're just too big for a hand to hold. So this is a really easy technique. So then you just put your cardstock on top of the stamp and just rub it well, and we'll have both of those pieces. The reason I did them both is so that you can have the extra for another card for later. I'm using my black ink, Mento ink, on white cardstock, and then I'll color it using my blends. Making sure that the Memento black is thoroughly dried. Colors are Mango Melody, Pumpkin Pie, Cajun Craze, Mossy Meadow. I usually start out with the light and then I take the dark and create some shadowing. Then I'm going to die cut it and I'm going to emboss the sentiment with gold embossing powder. And I'm just going to emboss both of them. I will set aside the one we're not going to make today, and I'll have that ready for making another card later. So you always use your embossing buddy, then your Versamark, then your embossing powder, and then you heat set it. And the heat will melt the powder and it gives it a metallic look. Be careful that your ink is dry. I my ink wasn't quite dry and my embossing powder stuck to the ink, the Mossy Meadow ink. And so when you do it, make sure it's completely dry before you emboss. Then what you're going to do is fray the edges. Now I have 6 pieces of twine, gold twine left over from the holiday catalog, and you just fray the edges with your take your pick tool for this technique that we're going to do. So each of these pieces is 3 inches long, and you just take the point of your tool and start at the edge and just start pulling the twine apart. Then we're going to put dimensionals on the back of our die shape to create this metallic design. I'm just taking 2 backings off at a time because they're so sticky, so just to make it easier to work with. And then I just alternate the loops. So on each side there's a loop, and each side there's a frayed edges. And there's enough adhesive left that it's going to stick to my card. So then I will just adhere the cardstock to the card base, position it for a like a nice white trim around the edge. Then place the die cut and then trim the edges. And then using gilded gems as an embellishment. And that finishes this card. Okay, now for our next card, remembering where the cut edge is, we're going to cut both the Whisper White and our Designer Series paper. This Designer Series paper is Forever Greenery Designer Series paper. The card, this cardstock is soft seafoam. We're just going to layer it. Then we're going to get our sentiment, hello. We're going to emboss it with white, and then we'll die cut it with a circle. We're going to do that in white. Then we're going to stamp with black ink our foliage, and we're going to color using markers. We're going to be using the Rococo Rose and the soft seafoam. And then I'll die cut them with some sprigs of, that color is shaded spruce. The green is shaded spruce. 2 in shaded spruce and 1 in white of the sprigs. And then we just layer on our card front. Ended up cutting some of the sprigs a little bit shorter because of the placement of the dimensionals. Made it kind of hard to position the sprigs under it, so I ended up having to cut them a little bit. Well, that's the last card. Thank you for joining me for my Quite Curvy class, where we made 4 different cards with 1 stamp bundle. Thanks for joining me. And the first card was found on a YouTube video from Stampin' Up.